Hi everyone, my name is Donna Iman and I'm running for US Congress in Austin, Texas in 2022. Now, you may have heard a lot about Texas in the past 24 to 48 hours, and you may be wondering why Texas Democrats have fled Texas and gone to Washington, D.C., and whether it will actually have impact in stopping voter suppression bills that are trying to be passed here in Texas by the GOP members of the Texas legislature. So, for those of you that are not following all the details very carefully, or maybe you're out of state and don't know all the details about Texas, I'm going to attempt to break down what were actually in these bills and pull out a couple of the items to illustrate to you what the voter suppression bills actually do in Texas. And you can go independently verify this information and decide for yourself if this indeed is just a performative act by Texas Democrats, or indeed this had impact and stopped voter suppression bills from passing in Texas. So during the regular session, which happened earlier this year, Texas Democrats walked out on the last day of the regular session in order to break quorum and stop Senate Bill 7 from passing. There were two original bills introduced in the regular session, House Bill 6 and Senate Bill 7. And there were three items in Senate Bill 7 that are of importance to discuss. Number one, the number of hours that you could vote on Sunday had been reduced in an attempt to prevent people attending Sunday services from going directly to the polls from there. The other item that was in there, which is of significance, is that it was very easy to overturn election results based on alleged fraud. And that item was something that was of big concern to Texas Democrats. But the third item, and the most important one, which would have real consequences for the most densely populated cities in Texas, did this. It would regulate the number of polling locations and the number of voting machines in the largest counties in Texas, counties with a population of 1 million or more. That meant in the most densely populated cities, if you have a very popular polling location, let's say a community center, which is able to accommodate maybe hundreds of voting machines, they would be limited in some fashion. And what that would cause is long lines in areas that are easy to access or maybe have public transportation, so it's easy to get there to vote for many people. And those would cause people to stand in line for a long time. So now why is Senate Bill 7 important? Because after Texas Democrats walked out breaking quorum, it did not pass. And during this new special session, the two new bills that were reintroduced, voter suppression bills, did not include these three items that were in Senate Bill 7. In fact, they were reintroduced as Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3. And if you're wondering, did walking out have an impact? You can see the results right there, that those three items that were in Senate Bill 7 are no longer in Senate Bill 1 or House Bill 3. And that is of huge importance. Why did they have to break quorum? So first of all, Texas has a House with 150 members and a Texas State Senate with 31 members. Now, the GOP members of the Texas legislature have control of both the House and the Senate. And they can pass any bill without a single Democrat vote. However, in order to do any kind of business, to reading of bills and actually to have a vote on a bill, you must have quorum. And quorum requires that you have 2/3 of the Senate as well as 2/3 of the House present in order to be able to do any kind of business during the legislative session. So this is why the only way for Texas Democrats to prevent any of these bills from passing was to break quorum. And the facts are here that by walking out on the last day of the regular session, they were able to prevent Senate Bill 7 from passing And the new bills that were reintroduced in the special session that's going on right now do not include some of these very stringent voter suppression tactics that were enacted by GOP members of the Texas legislature. So now you may be asking, why have Texas Democrats fled Texas and gone to Washington, D.C.? And here's the reason why. If they had just broken quorum and we were still in special session, they could be technically arrested and brought back to the state capitol in order to conduct business. Because Texas law enforcement authority does not really have any jurisdiction outside of the state, they have decided to exit the state in order to break quorum for the entire special session. Now, before I get into why this was important, and what's in Senate Bill 1 and House Bill 3, which is what they're trying to prevent from being passed right now, let's look at what Governor Abbott is saying about all of this.
You might remember, President Biden called me a Neanderthal for opening Texas 100% and no masks. It turned out he was wrong. After that opening, Texas COVID numbers improved substantially. Well, now President Biden is calling Texas names again. This time, he's chastising us for making it easy to vote, but hard to cheat. And once again, President Biden ignores the facts. The fact is that Texas is passing a law that expands, not reduces, the hours of early voting. That's more than many states, including President Biden's home state of Delaware, which has 0 hours of early voting. The Texas law also helps to prevent mail-in ballot fraud in Texas. That is an issue that both Republicans and Democrats agree on. It will uphold the integrity of our elections and ensure that Texans who do qualify to vote by mail will have the ability to do so. President Biden and the Democrats must stop the misinformation. Texas is very simply making it easier to vote and harder to cheat.
So you just watched Governor Abbott's video, and in this video, he makes several claims. The first claim he makes is that these bills actually expand the number of voting hours, making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. So let's explore that. One of the things that Senate Bill 1 does is it puts a ban on 24-hour voting. So that would mean that you're restricting the number of hours that a voter can vote. So the claim that it makes it easier to vote by expanding the number of hours is actually not true. So the next thing that Governor Abbott talks about in this video is mail-in voter fraud. So let's look at that. In 2020, the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is under indictment, he spent 22,000 hours investigating voter fraud in Texas. So 22,000 hours is 10 years of full-time weeks of work. 10 years. He spent all that money of Texas taxpayers to investigate voter fraud. And what did he find? He found 16 cases where the voter had put down that they lived at a different address than they actually did. Now, none of these cases resulted in jail time. So they were minor infractions, yet 22,000 hours were spent. So you can make a decision for yourself whether indeed we have widespread mail-in voter fraud in Texas. Now, the third thing Governor Abbott talks about, he says that Democrats actually agree with preventing mail-in voter fraud. Well, here's the thing. Senate Bill 1 in the special session, which was reintroduced, which the Texas Democrats walked out on to break quorum, passed yesterday in Texas. So you might be wondering, how did Senate Bill 1 pass? Because in the Senate, they actually did have quorum. They had 22 members present. But when the vote was taken, it passed on party line vote, 18-4, which means not a single Texas Democrat voted for it. If they did support these bills, then they would have stayed and they would have voted for it. The answer is that it's just not true, because these indeed are actually creating barriers for people to vote. Now let's look at what is actually in Senate Bill 1. Is there really voter suppression or not? So we know that there's a ban on 24-hour voting, And there's also a ban on drive-through voting. So drive-through voting, again, is when you drive up in your vehicle, you're given a portable voting machine to vote, and then you drive off once you're completed. Now, Texas GOP members want to ban this because they allege that it does not give the voter privacy in their vehicle because they may have other people in their vehicle and that can see how they're voting. The reason this is completely illogical is that Texas already allows curbside voting for anyone who is unable to make it inside a poll and vote at a voting machine. So this is already allowed, number one. Number two, Texas also allows anyone who is 65 and older to vote by mail, where they are mailed their ballot at home and they could be sitting at their kitchen table doing research on who to vote for, and any member of their household can walk by and see how they're voting. So there's no guarantee that the person has privacy, and if indeed there was somebody inside the car that they did not want, the voter did not want them to see how they were voting, then they don't have to actually come with them, or they could step outside of the car if they wanted to. Now, there's also a ban on distribution of mail-in ballot applications, which is not allowed to be done by any of the county officials. Now, mailing out mail-in ballot applications is something that is done in other states. In fact, there are some states that mail out a mail-in ballot application for every single registered voter. So somehow alleging that this would result in voter fraud, there's no logical basis for that whatsoever. In addition to voter ID already being required in Texas, they've also added things such as adding your driver's license number or the last 4 digits of your social security number to your mail-in ballot in order to make it even more secure, so that they can verify that the information inside corresponds with the information in the carrier envelope. These types of provisions have also been added to Senate Bill 1 for mail-in voting. Here's the thing about mail-in voting. In Texas, anyone who is 65 and older can vote by mail. There are no restrictions around that whatsoever. Yet, the Texas GOP legislator continuously claims that mail-in voting causes fraud. So you have to ask yourself, if something is completely safe for people who are 65 and older, how can it be completely unsafe and result in massive voter fraud when there's no evidence of that right now for anyone who is under 65 in age? In fact, restricting those who are under 65 from not being able to vote by mail is age discrimination, because a lot of people will say, well, look, Donna, they're just making it easier for people over 65 to vote. And I think that's a great idea. Not only should we make it easier for people who are 65 and over to vote, we should make it easier for every single person in Texas to vote. There's no logical reason behind restricting people being able to vote by mail, both by the fact that anyone over 65 and older can do that today, and second, by the fact that there is no evidence of mass voter fraud with mail-in voting based on 22,000 hours of investigation that's been done. So the last item that I want to bring up in Senate Bill 1 that is of importance is the ability to assist other voters with voting. So there's 2 types of assistance that can happen. One is where you're trying to help the person actually fill out their ballot because they're physically unable to do that. The second item is where you're basically helping the person interpret what's on the ballot. So being a translator if it's not written in the language that a person can read. In both these cases, you have to fill out a form if you're assisting somebody, put down your name, your identification, and confirm that you are no way influencing the way that person is voting. Okay, that makes sense. However, if for some reason you decide that you're going to carpool with 3 of your neighbors, if you drive, any more than 3 or more people that are unrelated to you to a polling station, you must also fill out a form stating that you did that, and that can be held against you if they believe that there was any kind of voter fraud that happened as a result of you just driving somebody or carpooling with 3 of your neighbors to the polling location. So you can decide for yourself whether these laws actually make sense for Texas or not. But I want to leave you with this. By Texas Democrats breaking quorum and leaving Texas right now, putting themselves in a position where they may be arrested and put in jail, have they really accomplished something? And if you look at what they've accomplished, is that specific things that were in Senate Bill 7 have not made it into these new bills. And the bill that was passed yesterday, which is Senate Bill 1, still has multiple things which I've demonstrated to you are in fact being pushed to restrict the ability for Texans to vote. And so I leave you with that to make a decision. And if you have any questions, send them my way and I'll try to answer them in the next video.